Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Scotty Bernick. I'm a landscape architect with Reagan Smith and Associates here on behalf of CBL, our client and owner for the Cool Springs Galleria. Appreciate your time. We'll be recording this meeting tonight. This is our neighborhood meeting, just to give you all a little information about some of the conceptual planning we've done to date, where we are, and some of the ideas that we have as we push forward. As I expect all of you know where the gallery is, this is sort of a good snip, though. Shows you exactly where we're located, right against I-65 and Mallory Lane. I'd like to say it's sort of the heartbeat of Cool Springs Galleria, where it all kicked off. Another shot, this is taken several years ago, but due to a really good leadership from the city of Franklin at the time, infrastructure was planned and put in place. This is actually a picture of Cool Springs Boulevard that would connect from Mac Hatcher towards the Galleria and I-65. You can actually see the Galleria there to sort of the left of the larger photo, and again, sort of the kickstart to what would soon become the regional commerce hub of the Galleria.
You want me to take this? You want me to take?
Yeah.
Thanks, Scotty.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is John Michelle, and I'm Senior Vice President of Redevelopment for CBL Properties. And I'm excited to be here today with a number of my colleagues. Our presentation today is the first step in the formal process to position Cool Springs Galleria for continued success, and it is the culmination of a lot of intentional planning, thought, and hard work. CBL has been involved with Cool Springs Galleria since its beginning. In fact, my direct supervisor served as project manager leading the development in the late 80s and early 90s. I think you can see him. He's the #2 person in the photo there on the right with the gray suit. He definitely does not look like that anymore. The Galleria opened in 1991 with 3 anchors and nearly 1 million square feet of shops. In 1993 and 1994, the mall was expanded with JCPenney and Belk. The mall remained mostly in its original configuration until 2015, when we proactively purchased and subsequently redeveloped the Sears to add new restaurants, retail, and a new mall entrance. The retail environment is dynamic and constantly evolving, and Cool Springs Galleria is an excellent example of what a successful and thriving enclosed mall property currently looks like. Today, the mall is very healthy, generates significant tax revenue, sees strong leasing demand, sustained foot traffic, and growing sales. But we understand the importance of working proactively to ensure this remains true into the future. We're here before you to propose updates to the mall campus that will give us the flexibility required to not only maintain the property's current position in the market, but to ensure it remains a vibrant community destination over the next decade and beyond. Our business requires a forward-looking and proactive approach, and the vision that we are sharing is intended to complement and modernize what is a very healthy campus today. Thank you very much for your time, and I will turn back to Scotty.
Yeah, appreciate it, John. Something that I think is probably maybe one of the most important part of the entire project is understanding the existing conditions. Really knowing the details behind this, looking at an inventory analysis, guides the Galleria, guides the property and everything that would be done on it. I wanted to spend a few minutes just to talk through a little bit about this specific site, and then as we get into the presentation, it'll lead to some of the design approaches and reasoning why we've considered certain aspects of the development. So as you see it here, the site is roughly 86.5 acres. It's between I-65 and Mallory Lane. We have 4 points of ingress, egress on sort of 3 sides of us. Most are signalized intersections. Something that's I think interesting about the Galleria, as you see here with the colors, there are currently 4 parcels that make up the 86.5 acres. Two of those parcels, just for example, Dillard's and Macy's, shown in red and green, combined are roughly 22 acres of the Galleria and are owned by those businesses. Additionally, as we looked and studied the site, done a lot of survey, we've considered where easements are located, where stormwater infrastructure is currently in place, understanding the utility corridors for the Galleria. Want to note the reason why these are so important is because, as John mentioned, this is a healthy Galleria that plans to be up and running while maybe future development happens. So it's most important that we do no harm to the businesses, to sort of the model and the program that's currently there today. With that said, it leaves some pieces around the Galleria. It's roughly, I would say, 85% impervious as an entire site. You'll see that, primarily made up of the gallery in the middle, roughly 1.5 million square foot of a building, and then just a very large mass of surface parking that surrounds the Galleria. So primarily, large surface parking lot, if you will, a lot of parking spaces, mostly underutilized today. John touched on this a little bit. Just want to sort of hit it again. I mean, it's always sort of been a part of the goal in the project is to make sure that we redevelop this or look at uses that would support the existing commercial uses. More specifically, we want to make sure that we're not providing uses that would compete with it, but again, to sort of support it, to follow these bits and pieces of Envision Franklin, our policy, to the best that we can. It's important that we continue to modernize the campus. As you've seen over the last few years, there's some rework and redevelopment that's been done. I think this is just maybe another phase of that. Looking to enhance the property, minimize surface surplus parking that's not quite utilized today, utilize the existing infrastructure, add open space where we can, and then also respect the current agreements that are in place. Let's see here. Does everybody see the screen okay? There should be a Envision Franklin, the zoning map up here.
Yeah, there's in the right corner, we see a blue beam square.
Okay.
Most of it's visible.
Try this again here, no promises. Any better?
Same thing.
Okay. Let me try do a full screen and then we'll see if this solves anything here. Is that better or worse?
Nothing.
Okay. We'll keep going. Let's see here, back to as best as I can. Is it make sure I'm able to sort of talk through these and hopefully not block too much data here.
So we can't see the presentation now. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. We'll try this. Is that a better approach?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for letting me know. I'm not seeing it on mine. So I want to talk through a little bit about the plan. So when we look at a development, there's a lot of layers that we consider. The most bottom layer would be our land use policy. In Franklin, we call this Envision Franklin. And again, it guides how we look at property, how property is zoned, helps planning and development follow a guide. And Envision Franklin is a product of community input that looks around different areas of the city. On the left, you'll see a piece of the Envision Franklin map. We're here in the purple area. We're sort of in the heart there where it says site, which is considered regional commerce. Want to talk a little bit about what regional commerce is. Again, this is a document that sort of should guide the city and how development works. But regional commerce, really is supposed to encourage high intensity activity centers that attract large numbers of people and employers from both within the city and as well as outside of the city. It it encourages development to provide housing opportunities so that you can live, work, play sort of all in one area, all on one site. It encourages you to look at infill development to replace existing parking, similar to, as I mentioned before, here at the gallery is a great example of that. Also, another item, it wants you to look at a really pedestrian-friendly circulation and elements, right? How do you incorporate civic space items that are important as we develop and grow the city in a responsible way? On the right side of the screen, you'll see a snip of the zoning map. More specifically, we're currently zoned RC12, and that stands for Regional Commerce 12. The 12 represents a height that could be approved up to 12 stories. Again, as I mentioned earlier, as we look at a city and how it develops, this plan identifies your major corridors, I-65, your major arterial roads, where there's currently commercial, where there's existing infrastructure, and where and how we'll improve infrastructure in certain areas of the town as it continues to evolve. So we're identified as RC12 zoning. What that means is RC12 allows a mixture of uses that includes multifamily, all types of commercial, retail, restaurant, and even hospitality. As we kicked off the project, we looked at some locations around the U.S. As a guide just to see what other developments are doing. We looked for projects that were healthy and doing well. We know not all the shopping centers are doing well. We're very fortunate in the city of Franklin to have one that is. But as we look at some comparable projects around Illinois, Colorado, there's one in California. They all sort of tell the same story, sort of in the pinkish color. You'll see a lot of the main massing of the existing malls in those locations, and with those, there was a lot of surface parking that surrounded them, similar to what we have here at the Galleria in Franklin. And then each exhibit also shows how the malls were looked at and developed to make sure that there were compatible uses, again, to promote the current commercial space that's going on, to complement it, not to compete with it. We see, mixture of uses, a mixed use development having, a range of, again, hospitality, multifamily, high-end restaurants, makerspace, different things like that. Could be office, are all important pieces to look at in a development. We see those being the most successful, where you can have a lot of opportunities and options while utilizing the space efficiently. Wanted to also, here's the concept plan of what we're proposing. We are proposing rezoning to a PD. The PD is just a nature of having some specific requirements because there's so many existing pieces of the Galleria, some history on it, the way that it's been submitted. We are requesting a rezone to a PD, although it is very similar to, and I would say almost identical to, the same uses, same rights that you would almost find in the RC12 district. The first thing we did is we met with city staff and chatted with them a good bit. We know that this project will be a multi-phase project that will not be built all at one time. We, in addition with staff, felt it was important to explore how the Galleria could be developed over years to come. I mentioned earlier in the presentation on the existing conditions map, there are several items of the plan of the site that control how and where we develop. For example, again, Macy's and Dillard's have ownership of those parcels. So the eastern and southern side of the campus is sort of off the table. On the westerly side of the campus, the Galleria folks have updated that about 10 years or so ago to enhance that space. So what we're showing here is some opportunities for this is really the western side of the Galleria. To orient you, it would be between Mallory Lane and the Galleria. So talking with staff on how do we look at this larger vision, knowing that it won't be taken down all at one time, to have a good plan in place to consider how circulation works. We also looked at some of the key items of the zoning ordinance. So our current ordinance, which we're following, has very specific design language on how buildings front the streets. It looks at building typologies and the type of uses that you have, what those features and what those buildings could look like. It identifies where and how parking can be placed. For example, if we were to build the Gallery today, it's unlikely we would have parking between Mallory Lane and the Galleria. So some of these newer design concepts factor into this. We've looked at Civic Space, how we can plug that in. Also, as part of our zoning ordinance and requirements is understanding, stormwater regs, water quality and quantity. Again, as those have updated since the early 90s when this was put in, there's a lot of what we call design challenges to consider. So as you look at this as sort of a concept plan showing the massing of it, you can start to sort of see where we've considered the different utility corridors, the stormwater corridors, the access points into the site, circulation, and again, programming of the existing Galleria. As I said earlier, sort of a do no harm to what's happening there. So this is sort of a high level, and I'll walk through the uses. We're proposing, again, this sort of for the overall plan, a mix of uses. We have on the left residential, sort of left up in middle is sort of a yellowish color, and that's a multifamily product, roughly 600 units. Those right now would be sort of planned in two phases. You can sort of see where the buildings look split. There would be a green roof on top of that separating that, but each side of that sort of represents a phase of a block that could be built. Again, trying to consider when and how the Galleria develops over time is really a critical piece to this. The items in red represent the commercial space. We foresee some opportunity for some new restaurants, some retail on the ground floor of the residential, looking at some opportunity for some retail components there as well. And then on the sort of lower right side, you'll see some hospitality. Again, thinking about the connection points of circulation, how you come in, but providing different uses that respond to these regional commerce type of activities that, again, is important to our city of Franklin. As we look at this, we mentioned a little bit about some of our stormwater things earlier. You'll see we're starting to introduce a lot more green space that's than there is currently today by like several acres. Along with that green space, you have the opportunity for both water quality and quantity, as well as a really good civic spaces that get programmed in and adjacent to these uses. So looking at how do we activate the streetscapes through there. So currently there's a ring road that goes around the Galleria, looking to have some level of that same approach, but taking a very careful consideration of how the circulation works from a pedestrian level, as well as a vehicular level. So we like to look at this primarily for a pedestrian, but the reality is it still has to function extremely well. Everything from turning movements to how each of the phases would work while keeping the Galleria functionally operating. This is a perspective of the proposed development. You'll see in brown is the existing Galleria. Here, you'll on sort of internally onto the campus, you'll see the hospitality, some of the retail, restaurant, entertainment spaces, the multifamily block, and then surrounding here is just sort of a figure mass of the existing uses around town. You'll see in the background on the opposite side of some of the very more intense sort of office type products. East Works there is in the back, Nissan here sort of in the back corner there. So it gives you a little bit of a good bird's eye view. Though none of us will really experience it from this high up, it gives you a general idea of how the lay of the land. What's important again is that we have these, really good functional streetscapes, good facing buildings, architecture, parallel parking to, again, create a neighborhood, commercial space that works well and functions well. Just some character imagery that we foresee. You'll see a lot of the new buildings go up. The new ordinance has very strict standards. We'll be following those standards, but just some ideas of different types of uses, different types of spaces around that are pretty exciting. I want to touch a little bit on transit. The Galleria is fortunate. It's a part of the Franklin Transit Authority, sort of the bus route, right, that connects through there on the weekdays as well as the weekends. So it's currently sort of a primary, I guess, drop-off pickup location, which again works well. As we look at this from a larger plan, it makes a lot of sense to again, promote our density along our main corridors where they go, while still providing good access points into parts of our downtown, along other parts on the east side of I-65. As we zoom in and look at circulation at a more of a micro scale, something we do is consider sort of, we call it the 5-minute walk when you're at the Galleria and you're looking to get from one place to the other. Currently it's really important as we plan that the restaurants or the residential or the hospitality is with a really comfortable distance to the Galleria to support it, to further continue the reason to, not get in your car and have to drive somewhere. So you'll see that with these yellow dashed lines. In pink, you'll see the vehicular circulation of how that works, with Galleria Boulevard being probably one of the primary entrances. You'll see sort of the pink circulation, how it can get through the side. And then the pedestrian circulation, I sort of touched on this earlier, but it's shown in blue, looking how to continue to activate, create a space that currently is a lot of parking and provide pedestrian safe destinations and experiences to get to and from these different spaces. As I mentioned earlier, by default of incorporating some of the new principles of our zoning ordinance, bringing buildings up to our streetscape, we have a really good opportunity to reimagine what the sidewalk and that frontage looks like along our ring road. Would face Mallory and sort of face out. So you'll see some ideas and some design elements here that we'd like to incorporate. Mentioned earlier about civic space and open space. As part of our plan, we look at sort of our natural open space, but also where do we have these opportunities for civic space. Civic space could be a little bit more formal in nature, places like plazas, things like that the existing tenants or tenants of the Galleria, as well as future tenants could use that are here on campus. Very important piece of it, I think, as a lot of us go to the Galleria, we experience it on the inside, and part of our design refresh of this is to consider the outside experience again, is that live, work, play all in one place. Some general character ideas. Again, these are just different locations around, but we pull inspiration from these different types of plant types, some structures, pavement materials, just different ways to activate the spaces. Again, keep the pedestrian keep the pedestrian experience in mind. Some zoom ins of some of the potential civic spaces. This here would be located sort of in front of the existing JCP, if you will. Shows how the both incorporating some stormwater elements, seating opportunities for dining and future little small retail components that could fit underneath the residential. So again, trying to provide some destination opportunities, places that you want to be able to get outside, take a few laps, do some exercise laps, not just in the mall, but even outside. Here's a secondary one to give you an idea of the location. That Cheesecake Factory is there on the right. Belk is there on the left. I'm sorry, on the bottom, and then on the left, which is hard to see, would be some future retail space that could be on the ground floor. So again, reimagining, how a parking lot works. We know that this whole area is sort of our back of house, but it's important to the design, to the way that you experience the Galleria, experience the space, to incorporate some really usable civic spaces in between, connect, as we say, sort of connect the dots to and from. I want to go through a little bit of the phasing. I mentioned at the kickoff of this call, we are looking at a plan that is a long-term plan. It was important to the design team and the city that we don't just look at one area. So although it's easy and we may be thinking only phase one now, we're trying to explore beyond that and consider what the gallery could look like. So this is a sort of a snippet of how this will phase out or how this could phase out over the years. As I mentioned earlier, the existing Galleria is just about 1.5 million square foot of building as it sits today. The image here shows the 6 different phases. I'll go through each of these sort of one by one. And the upper right corner is phase one. We see this area as being the most viable space on the site, again, because we have a really healthy Galleria. This based on our existing utilities, existing storm, lease agreements, and things of that nature. This is sort of the corner that makes the most sense, that we see being more of an immediate area to consider some redevelopment for. With this phase, looking at some restaurant and or entertainment type of uses, again, sort of flanking our ring road towards Mallory, with the parking behind, keeping primarily the circulation identical to what's out there today with the ring road, as well as all of sort of the internal workings of this space. Something that we see as a benefit specifically with the whole development, but you can sort of see here on phase one, as we eliminate curb cuts throughout the area, it sort of gets rid of sort of the parking lot fill as you're going through, and creates more of a true streetscape with potential for parking, some good water quality. It really will soften up the space a lot, and will be, I think, a nice phase to sort of kick off the hopefully future improvements for this Galleria. In phase two, we're looking to add some retail space. You'll see that here adjacent to JCP, roughly 20,000 square feet of an add. Some of the parking modifications would likely get revised here to incorporate service and things of that nature. Also, the Civic Space I showed you earlier, sort of the detail in front of the Cheesecake and next to Belk, would happen in here as well. That would also happen with phase one. Some of those Civic Spaces get plugged in, so you can sort of see this evolve. Phase three, we look at reworking the ingress egress from Mallory Lane, specifically at Crossroads Boulevard. As I mentioned earlier, thinking about the function of the site, how it works, making sure that the program doesn't affect or cause traffic to back up into Mallory Lane, pulling that drive further in the site. This phase three would incorporate sort of a small retail, some additional civic space there. Again, as you come into the site, having direct sight to the Galleria as you see it today, but enhancing it and sort of changing the experience, incorporating the ring road that comes into the site internally into the gallery a little bit more. Phase four, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at some multifamily. This would be the first phase, roughly 300 units that we would foresee. It's important, talking with some of the requirements of code and fire and how this works is with ring roads, providing circulation all the way around the building. This building, as well as phase five, which I'd show you, would have structured parking so that they park themselves. This phase four would also provide some of that ground floor retail space that could be used for restaurant or things of that nature. Phase five shows how the second 300 units could be taken down, again with a parking structure. In the middle, you're seeing sort of the rooftop, if you will, of this space. Again, looking at how all of the circulation works as a whole. And the last phase is the hospitality. Again, just looking at ways to think about how to utilize the space, different hours of the day, and how the different uses play well together. This is showing a 120 key hotel. As sort of we wrap up, wanted to go over our schedule for the process. We know these processes evolve and they change. As of right now, this is sort of the schedule that we're tracking on. Tonight we have our neighborhood meeting. We're looking next Monday to make an initial submittal to the city. This is our opportunity to start getting more feedback, staff comments from all the different departments of the city for us to assess and consider. On May 23rd, we would be in front of the joint conceptual workshop. That's a chance for us to have an informal dialogue with the Planning Commission and the BOMA members to talk through some of the details of the plan. Again, answer some questions and go through that in an informal setting. On June 27th, we're looking to have our Planning Commission meeting. There would be a public hearing that is held at that meeting. Following that would be a BOMA work session. Sometimes that work session and the first reading happen on the same night, but we'd see those two first readings. And then August 13th is the second reading at BOMA. And again, that would be a public hearing. So sort of two opportunities for public input at those meetings, ending with the third and final reading in sort of late August. With that said, I want to turn it over to see if there's any questions we can answer.
I've got a question. I'm a property owner, so I received the notice. Thanks, guys, for putting this together. My understanding is that the Galleria is an anomaly as far as its success compared to other malls in the country. I'm worried about all this being done and then Cool Springs joining what's happening to the other malls, and then there being a lot of empty space, which would possibly attract more crime, vacant areas. I mean, do you guys really foresee the mall being able to continue to grow where it's at? The addition of residential, I think, is great, but I'm worried about all the retail space.
I'll try to take a shot at that. Appreciate the question and thanks for coming. There's definitely a narrative in the macro environment that malls are failing. Malls are not failing. Some malls are failing. There are too many malls in the country, and I think you can look at a 20-mile ring around Nashville, and there are 2 enclosed malls that are clear winners. This is one of them. We own 94 properties. 55 of them are enclosed malls. So we own other malls that are doing well like this. We own some malls in the middle, and we own some that have some challenges. So we have a pretty good grip on what's happening in the industry. And this is an incredibly successful mall. What we're talking about doing is investing to keep it successful and to keep it modern and to keep it fresh. We have a tremendous amount of confidence in the viability of the mall product here in Franklin for the medium and long term. Does that answer your question? And if you want to get more specific, let me know.
No, it does. It does, but there are other malls within this 20-mile radius that have failed. And so it's not a guarantee, but I know you guys wouldn't spend this kind of money if you hadn't put a lot of research into it.
And there's a lot of different reasons that go into it. Demographics are a primary reason, and then competition. So I think as we watch in this particular situation, the competition have struggles, we feel more solid about the product that we have. We've got some very, very solid anchor department stores here that are committed to doing business here for the long term. And really what we're talking about doing is creating the ability to invest, to just to sustain it and make it better. We're extremely confident in the long-term viability of the enclosed mall here.
Thank you. Yep.
Are there any other questions? If not, Joey, would you have any thoughts for us? Would you like us to hang on, or shall we wrap up and send you the recording?
Yeah, if there are no other questions, you can go ahead and wrap up.
All right. I think that's all the questions. If not, please interrupt. We really appreciate the time tonight. Again, we're very excited about this. The gallery has been such an important part to our community in Franklin, and will continue to be an important part. I see this as sort of the kickstart to a lot of great things, and excited that it's still a part and sort of refreshing. So thanks for your time, and we appreciate everything.